Hey, folks, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Real Talk Fishing with No Limits. Today, we're going to talk to an industry professional, a good friend of mine, Dan Johnston with St. Croix Rods, national sales rep. And Dan is a hell of a fisherman. We're going to tell some stories, just talk fishing, tell you a little bit about what's going on over at St. Croix. If you're just curious about the St. Croix Rods you hear about, you're going to want to tune in. We're not going to dive too deep into the technical aspect of it. We're just going to talk a lot of fishing and kind of what rods pair. Hey, folks, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Real Talk Fishing with No Limits. Today, we are diving in deep to what makes certain things tick, like St. Croix Rods and 7 Reels with my good friend and the guy I like to call the professor, Mr. Dan Johnston from St. Croix. What's going on, buddy?
Brian, thanks for having me, man. Looking forward to it. It's going to be fun just shooting the breeze, talking fishing, talking little product, and looking forward to it.
Like I said, fishing, we were just chatting here before we logged on, and it's unseasonably warm. And like I said, I don't hate it because extend the fishing season a little bit. But of course, the ice fishing season's always something to look forward to. And St. Croix's got some pretty slick ice rods I'd like to go get my hands on. But I'm okay if I only got to use them for a month versus 3 or 4 months. So
I just did a podcast last week on Indian summer and how we attack that. And it's funny, it kind of segued right into what you were talking about. Man, it sure feels good to be in shorts and a shirt like I've got on, but
right.
Man, that water temperature is still high. I got them to bite a buzzbait real good the week before. Water dipped into the upper 60s, then it went right up to the upper 70s, and they wouldn't bite the buzzbait. And I, like an idiot, kept throwing it. And I'm like thinking, man, just look at my surface temperature gauge. And the goal stopped diving on shad. And I'm like, man, this Indian summer thing, I'm ready for it to cool off.
Yeah, they just started diving on shad for me there, Dan. Like, This should have been happening months ago. They're there. I can see the bait, and the white bass are pushing it up, and I'm waiting for them to blow up so I can just put clients on it because it's an absolute blast. But a cigarette butt on a hook and whip it out there, you're going to catch them. Whatever hits the water is, white bass. And I got these like 2.5 pound white bass. So they're monsters, right? They're 18-inch white bass. They're fun, but only got a couple days on it. And now the goal's kind of moved, but the bait's still there and the bass are still there. So they'll hopefully start biting more. Let's cover a little background for those that don't know, Dan. What your role over there with St. Croix? What's your background? For those that don't know, he's not just like the greatest sales rep for St. Croix in the world. He's a fishing fanatic, and if he wasn't doing this, you might be seeing him on the Bass Elite Tour, I think, somewhere. So bring us up to speed.
Yeah, honestly, Brian, I've been covered up in fishing ever since. I was thinking about that because you sent me a little list of questions, and
Yep.
I do a lot of podcasts, and I'm like, where am I going to go into this one? But I do have a story because I got asked this on a interview at ICAST years ago, the big dealer show that we represent every year in the industry. And guy asked me, he goes, "How'd you get into fishing?" And I didn't really, and I thought, I can answer that. I was on a elementary school field trip, when we took a bus down to a local lake I still live relatively close to. And there are these docks we're walking out on, right? And we're checking out the boats and checking out nature and all this cool stuff. I looked down between the slat of this dock and I saw these two little eyes right up on the surface. I'm little. I mean, little. I don't even know what grade it was, but I was little. Almost so little they got to like connect you to ropes when they walk you around, right?
Put them
And
on a
I
leash.
thought, you know what? I'm like, whatever that is, I'm going to figure it out. And I thought there was an old piece of line with like an old Aberdeen, probably like a number, I'd guess like a number 6 gold Aberdeen hook on it with a dried up night crawler. And I'm like, you know what? If I drop that thing down there, something might happen. And I dropped it down there and something took it and broke my line. And I thought, all right, from that day forward, I'm in, and I can actually take it back to an instance. And then I was blessed enough. My dad took me fishing a ton when I was little and got into it, and then got into fly fishing really hardcore. Still teach it to this day on the casting side, but I did some guiding in Northeast Iowa. Been covered up on the bass side ever since I could breathe, it seems like. And then I love the crappie thing, and doesn't hurt to go out and whack on a few walleyes with you every year, as good as you are at it, throwing that little jig out there and on electronics. But the St. Croix side, Brian, I've been with them for going on 25 years now. Started as a sales rep on the road. with 4 states, that expanded to 6 states. Always was involved with the product teams. And then now I do national sales, and I'm also on the rod team and the reel team as well. So super blessed, great company, love it. We're all about our anglers and trying to make them better on the water, and it's been a blast.
It is definitely a great company to be, and a great family to be part of. Really, that's ultimately what it is over there. Created, founded by a family, and still basically ran like a family.
Well, literally, it's family owned.
Literally,
I mean,
right? Literally,
and they're good friends, and there's times I've sat down with them and we huddle up and start talking about work and all those things, and then the conversation goes into my son and how am I doing personally, and that reciprocates right back to them. They're just wonderful people, and they've created a culture. Like you said, it is family. I mean, we're far from perfect, man. I mean, we make our mistakes like everybody, but at the core level, we're about making people better, trying to help you sincerely, honestly. Um, and we try to listen really well. I mean, a lot of the rods that we've come out with are a direct result of talking to guys like you, to be honest with you, and trying to find out what you're really looking for and why does that matter. And a lot of us on the product teams have been anglers ourselves forever at St. Croix. So I'm thinking, okay, if Brian wants that jig and wrap to do this, and he's using this kind of line, and how do we want that tip to deflect, and what kind of materials can we use? And we talk about that amongst our team, and just the end goal is to make people better on the water. That's literally why we exist. So that's a cool dynamic, because we're not just trying to push stuff out there and sell stuff. It's a culture, and it's different, and it's been really cool to belong to it because we're really sincere about helping people.
yeah. And I think anybody who's ever owned a St. Croix has more than one, and they've come back, and that's it. Now you're part of the family. You folded in. You get it. I mean, all my clients, that's all it's in the boat of St. Croix rods. They use them, and they're like, "Oh, I've always wanted." The other day, I've always wanted to use one of these. Guarantee you, it's all he's going to use moving forward, because he said the same thing. He's like, "That okay? I'm sold." He goes, I need to get a new one of these jigging." He was a bass guy out of Wisconsin, and I told him about the Bass X promos, but the physics, if he's looking for the getting into the scoping thing, and gave him a handful of lines to look at, and he's like, "Yep." He goes, I just haven't had the opportunity to use one. Now that I used one, he's like, "Yeah, okay, I get it, I understand it." I said, "There's so much more to it than just the rod in your hand, though. The service, and if you break a tip or do something, the warranty. I mean, there's so much to it." And I'm like, "But you just go get yourself one, and you'll figure all that out."
It's funny you say that, because I've been at, you can imagine with the decades of,
Yeah.
from, TV to radio to podcasts to sports shows to talking to tens of thousands of anglers at shows and all that. I get asked that too. They're like, all right, dude, seriously, is there really a difference, in your Legend Elite, for example? And I'm like, you know what? The best way I can narrow it down, because I try to, obviously my job is national sales, and I have sales reps that I work with to try to make our company play a small part in helping our company be successful. I get that. And selling rods is a big part of that. That said, when I get asked that question, I take my sales hat off and I go right back to being an angler. And really what I dive into, the biggest things that you can notice, and I say this super sincerely when I say this, is baits where you need ultimate feel, or instances to where you need to feel the bite. And what I mean by, you know, any type of inhalation fish, like let me just talk to bass and crappie. Both of those suck that bait in. Okay. That thump you feel is a high speed movement from that bait, from where it's at, and it's down choked, right? So it's moving that far really, really, really fast. And that's what you feel in that thump. And granted, there's a lot of lines out there, whether they're polyethylene or fluoro, or lines have come a long ways with sensitivity. But absolutely, I'm here to tell you right now, when you're talking about feeling the bite on slack line, or a bass coming up and pushing a chatterbait and taking the blade out of cadence, or something crazy, or feeling a little tiny string of coontail on your bait and you got to rip that thing clean, that is where it absolutely matters. And I'll take it to my grave, man. Now there's times I'm running a number 7 spinnerbait in dirty water, chunking winding, or a big heavy crankbait. I don't want that. I don't need it. I don't care. But anything on the bottom, my finesse jigs, my shaky heads, my drop shot for sure,
Yep.
all my finesse walleye rods, my dock shooting rods for crappies, because you're fishing super slack line back there, waiting for that thump. It absolutely matters. And to your point, until you try it and experience that for yourself, you won't understand. And it's really cool when you feel it, because there's no doubt it makes you better.
Oh yeah, that slackliners. That my Legend Extreme has got my Z-Man jerk shad on it, and I'll run some little Gold Chamberlain early in the spring, and that thing just, you get bit so many times on slack line or wind blow or whatever the case is, you current, and I mean, I bet 50% of the fish in the spring I set the hook on when that thing is slack. I think this rod's so sensitive, but it's the extra fast action tip, and there's just so many good things. Like I always tell people, I can feel a walleye fart on it when it swims by. That's it. That's the only one I tell them, because they're like, man, and I've had guys, the Cedar Shores from us say, yeah, we just anchored up and watched you two put on a clinic over there all day. We're like, we don't get it. And I'm like, I'm telling you, the line, the rod, the reels, the little things add up to make a big difference. It's not just, hey, this is just what everybody else has. There's a reason for it and behind it. And when it works, it works.
I shot a product video with our Legend Extreme when it first came out. There's a few of us that got them. We were supposed to kind of shoot a hype video on it, and it had that, extreme skin handle and SC5 and carbon guides. And I'm thinking, man, this is going to be freak show sensitive, but you never know till you take it out. So I do remember going down a pea gravel bank, and there's a lay down on this pea gravel bank. Every single September, we're just there. I mean, they're just there. It's one of those video cheating spots. I call it a P.O. box, spot on a spot, stupid, easy spot. And I pull up on this thing, and it was blowing, and the only way I could present it into the crotch of the tree where I wanted to get, I never want to go over perpendicular on something with a jig, unless I absolutely have to. So I knew where I wanted to get it, but I knew it was a crosswind. I'm like, dang it, I don't really know if I want to do that, but I got to do it, whatever. And I remember pitching that thing under there, and I'm holding it, and I've got significant bow in my line. And I think I'd have to go back and read the transcript on what I said in the press release when the rod came out. But Brian, it felt like a bat or something ran into my line, and it was a bite. It literally, I had so much slack in my line, all I felt was this, where I wheeled down, and I'm like, I should swing on this thing, but he doesn't have it.
Right.
I'm like, it was almost like something knocking the filling out of my teeth. And like an idiot, it felt so weird I didn't swing on it, and I should have. And I pitched it in there again. That time it ate it on the way down and set the hook and landed it. But I'll never forget that bite. Granted, it was on 15-pound fluoro, and it was so I was well connected to the sensitivity aspect of it, generally speaking. But that rod with that handle, I mean, and that goes back to what I was talking about before. There's certain bites that you feel on really good equipment that I'm not necessarily going to say you're going to feel on just everything. And you know me better than anybody. I'll never sit here and put any rod down or brand down or angler's opinion down or anything. But what I'm here to tell you is what I experience, because I got a reputation to uphold, and I'm not going to. You told me I could use expletives. I'm not going to bullshit people. If I don't like it, I'm going to tell you. If I like it, I'm going to really tell you. And in that case, on some of that high end stuff, and it is freak show. It is really cool to fish.
It is. They catch you off guard so often. You just close the bell and you're like thinking, all right, I got to let it drop, whatever. And as that process has happened, you're like, oh, that was a bite, and then you totally forgot to set the hook, or you reel down on it quick. You're like, I was not expecting that. It's a good feeling. We love that thump and that tick. It's a name that many of you recognize out there. Dan is quite familiar with and has got the privilege of spending, I think you guys fish some tournaments together even, but Tommy Scarless, bet you got some stories. You spent a lot of time with Tommy. Tommy's a old St. Croix guy. Actually, he's the one that introduced us years ago. You guys fish crappie tournaments together?
We fished Crappie Masters. He was a dear friend of mine. Matter of fact, the last seminar he ever did, I was right before him. A seminar I started it, I don't know, 25 years ago, whatever, in Iowa. And after a few years, I pulled some big names in, Tommy being one of them. And Man, we had so much fun, got to be great friends. Dear to my heart, you know. I got a call that morning. He fell out of his tree stand even before he knew he had the tumor in his brain. And
Right.
I got a call that morning, and I'm a avid bow hunter, you know. So I connected to that one. I'm thinking, oh man, and went through all that. And you know, all you can do in something like that is try to be there for somebody. But I will tell you this: if you're going to go there, um, and it's kind of hard for me to talk about it, but I'll say it because it's in a good way. I mean, I went and visited him in the hospital a bunch of times, and we had talked all the time, and all the way through his struggles, you know, towards the end. And
Yep.
he never put anything on himself for feeling sorry for people. Matter of fact, he told me one time that getting his brain tumor was the biggest blessing he's ever had. And I said, dude, what are you talking about? And he said, finally, now people take me serious about my faith. And I'm like, you talk about something that's inspirational, and you know, and Tommy, I'll tell you, he was a hammer on the water. We all know that.
Yep.
He ruffled some feathers. There were some people that didn't like him on the water. I get it. A lot of us loved him. But if you know, if how he handled his struggle right up to finality with what he fought wasn't handled the right way, then I want to see what is the right way, because
No doubt.
he gave everybody else credit. He really leaned into faith really hard and said some things that were inspirational to a lot of people. Things I'll never forget. When things get tough, you know, you can reach down to people that you respect and the things they tell you, and more importantly, how they actually act through adversity. What a testament. What a great guy, man.
I would say he probably impacted more people in those last 2 years than his first 20.
100%.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
One of my guides, Scott, drew him. Scott was on the Coingler side at NWT tournament, Devil's Lake. So it would have been, I don't know, one of his last tournaments. But so Scott was fortunate to drew Tommy, and you know, so I introduced him the night before. Said, "Hey, Tommy, hey, this is your co for tomorrow. This is my buddy. He's traveling with me. He's my guides." He's like, "Oh, okay." So I'm like, "You can ask him whatever you want at noon. He can give you any information you want for pre-fishing." We had a pretty good pre-fish, and I don't think Tommy or I did great in that tournament. But and Scott's got so many stories. They didn't do great. Didn't care. I pretty much asked him today. I'd be like, it was the single best day of fishing, even though we didn't catch a lot. But you know, it started off with Tommy had a deal where he asked the co's to bring cookies. You know, what do you need me to bring? Bring me cookies. You know, it's just to see what level of this co-effort he's going to put into it. Are you going to stop at the gas station? Or are you going to go to the grocery store, pick up some homemade? Or are you going to have somebody make you something quick? Tommy forgot to put gas in the boat, so they didn't go far from the boat launch. So they would take off, and he went, you know, he said something. Scott's like, what? He's like, I forgot to get gas. He's like, I guess we're just fishing over here today, you know, and he said it was like 12:01, and Tommy goes, okay, so tell me, you know, what's the secret? Where are you catching them? It's like here, you know, but they couldn't go to work. They didn't have that much gas, but they cracked on some good Devil's Lake walleye and just had a blast. Had a bunch of stories. Broke a rod. He shut the lid on a Legend Walleye tournament series right off the bat. And he said, Tommy just looked up and says, "Okay, God, so this is how we're gonna do it today," you know. And he was like, I got it. Then it was, we got no gas. We got this, you know. But fortunately, Scott brought him good cookies. So
yeah.
Hell of a guy.
It's funny. One time, the first crappie masters we fished on Lake of the Ozarks, I've never seen a guy, and I pull my boat on the trailer through the Ozark roads pretty fast because I've been doing that down there forever. I keep my boat down there all winter. What's that big boat you guys run? Is it a 520? What big walleye boat? 521.
ZB21.
Yeah, he ran a great.
620 or 620. Yeah, he had a 621.
620. Yep. That's what it was. I've never seen a guy pull one of those with his big diesel through those Ozark hills like that. Man, he had me holding onto my seat like I thought I drove fast. And he's just like talking. We got the radio going. No big deal. Headed to dinner. Just flying like 65 mile an hour up and down. I'm thinking, man, if a whitetail runs out, we are going to meet our maker. You know, but no, he was a very very eccentric personality, amazing speaker. And what was cool is he could totally back it up on the water. You know, I mean, I miss him dearly.
Yeah, hell of a guy. What, you talked about the dock skipping. Is that video still out there?
Yeah, it's on, if you just go on YouTube and just Google Lake of the Ozarks St. Croix dock shooting. It'll come up. And it's not really skipping. I mean, it'll skip once it gets back there a ways. I don't even want it to. I want to aerialize it the whole way, but it was I didn't come up with this, man. This was something that a guy showed me down there, good grief, 15, 20 years ago. And being a bass fisherman and being a loving skipping docks with bass jigs, I thought this is the coolest way to catch crappies I've ever seen in my life, and worked at it really, really, really hard. Brian, I'm a little competitive that way. So, I mean, I spent hours and hours and hours taking nothing but shooting rods down there on the lake, and finally got to the point where got okay at it, and then started doing Wally Marshall seminars at the World Crappie Classic for him, and shooting pop cans, shooting lifesavers on a piece of dental floss with a crappie jig under a dock. But it's cool to see people's interest in it, because it's a cool way to do it, but also opens up a whole new toolbox of fishing for people that have been fishing for 50 years and never even heard of it before. And it's really a rewarding way to do it. I got taught my dad to do it a few years ago, and he loves it. He's like 90, he's got arthritis, and he goes, man, I'm going to get that thing under there no matter what, But no, it's a really fun way to fish. We've got a 6.9 MLXF and Avid panfish that's the juice for that. It's like a Navy SEAL rifle. It'll shoot to the back of a great big tugboat if you want to, but it'll go into a crack about that wide. It's really cool. So,
yeah, folks, head over to YouTube, check that out. While you're on to YouTube, watch this. Head over there and check it out. Dan is an expert at it. It's pretty cool. It's definitely a skill. It's not, you don't get it right on your first try. That's for sure. Maybe not your first 100, but
it's not as hard as you think, as long as you're set up right and you follow some basic steps. It's like anything, and then, of course, if you want to get really adept at it, it's time on the water and doing it a lot, and different light conditions and wind and all the things that work against you. But a lot of it is just getting set up right line, right rod, right size jig, how to hold it. It's putting up your non-shooting hand right under your shooting hand, elevating the rod tip. I talk about all those things in the video, but once you get the ABCs of it, it'll come a lot quicker than you think. And the thing is, I use it bass fishing all the time now with a Ned rig. I do it with a fluke. I do it with a lot of things that is a direct relation to what I learned on the crappie side.
Oh yeah, I bet. Yeah, that's a great way to get a Ned rig in there, because those are deadly. I've been whacking some walleyes. I run my Victory rod a lot with my Ned rig, and I catch. That's an overlooked walleye bait. It's bass bait.
You do that for walleyes a lot?
Oh yeah, all summer long.
Cool.
Hey folks, I want to tell you about this new line that Seaguar introduced this year. It's been on the market for a couple years, but it's been over in Japan. They just brought it over to the United States this year, and I absolutely love it. It's called PEX8. This is by far the thinnest diameter braid I have ever used. This is still an 8-strand braided line with such a thin diameter. It's unbelievable. I'm using an 18-pound test today, and it feels like 2-pound. The advantages to this thin diameter is, if it's windy out, I'm not catching much wind, I get less bow in the line. High pressure situations where the fish are, taking on a lot of fishing pressure, a thinner diameter line, less visible, of course. Current in the rivers, I'm going to cut the current a little better. I'm going to get better control, and they did all this without losing any of its strength. This stuff is still strong as all the Seaguar braided lines, and the sensitivity is second to none. So check this out. This is PEX8 over at seaguar.com.
Even this guy I actually had from Wisconsin the other day, he went, where did he go? Somewhere, I want to say his Erie or Green Bay, but his guy Ned rigged all day long. Ozark, Lake of the Woods, excuse me. He was at Lake of the Woods. He said they Ned rigged for walleye all day long.
Just a TRD?
Yep, that's what I got on mine.
No kidding.
Yep. I'll go sometimes
I've
with the
caught
live
them,
crawler, but if they're biting good, I go with TRDs.
I've caught a lot of them on Ned rigs. Most of the ones I've caught have been swimming it back to the boat, with a constant cadence, which is a great way to fish a Ned rig, especially right off a current. But that's how I've caught most of my walleyes. But I haven't caught a lot of them putting it on the bottom. And maybe it's just something I'm doing, but I don't know why they wouldn't hit it. I mean, it's imitating a minnow,
Yeah, I watch them on live scope, or I'll find them, and if they're biting a crawler good, I'll just go to the TRD and Ned rig, and it gets better, and I can just let it, because they're so, you'll watch them. I mean, this scope obviously helps you to, make this thing all come to, where it is nowadays, but because they'll sit there and just look, and with that thing, just let it sit. Don't even touch it. Don't move it. Pop it a couple times, and if they follow it, then when they just stare, give it sometimes 5 or 10 seconds, and all of a sudden they're just, thump, they'll just pick it right up. It's just,
that's really cool. Are you using more of minnow colors doing that, or?
Nope, brown and orange.
No kidding.
Crawler. Yep, crawler. I use it to,
yeah, I suppose. That's cool.
Same with the grub. I had an eye candy grub that never came off. The Z-Man jerk shad, one of those never leaves the rod, and then that Ned rig is in there for most. I actually just took it out like 3 days ago because they're strictly minnows now, which I'm sure it'll still work, but it was really when the crawler bite was good. Because a lot of them don't want to hit the crawler on. They'll follow it down, and when I'll try to pause it or catch them suspended with it, if they're up there, they don't tend to hit it. But if they follow it, then I just let it drop, and then when it'll sit there, and then 5-10 seconds, sometimes 20 seconds, and then boom, you can film, pick it right up.
Wow.
No. But without a live scope, I would have known that. I would have still thrown it and still caught them without it. But now I catch a hell of a lot more because I could tell that they're just looking at it and just give it a second, and it totally, instead of laying it, I'm fishing a lot of mud, silt. So that live bait is, without it, is just laying down in it, and they can't, maybe they'll lose it, whatever the case is, but just having it stick up a little bit. That's the trick. But that I used my, which victory rod? Tactical one, I think I got the Ned rig on. I just got a couple of them, but hey, I love that rod.
I throw it on a 7.3 MLXF a lot with braid, with a fluoro leader, mostly for, largemouth too, but really for smallmouth, it's beyond lethal. That bait is, and it's interesting you're saying what you're saying, and I totally agree. I think the biggest mistake some people make with a Ned rig is they try to do too much to it. That Elastec material that Z-Man has, and the Berkeley Power Bait General is really good too. I mean, it's a little fatter, but man, you talk about a bait they just frickin' eat and don't want to let go. I mean, at all. But the best times, to your point, that I've had with it is either just letting it literally sit there or just kind of a real slow drag. I'm not doing a lot to it. And if you see it in clear water, it's sitting up at a 45 because of that tail, and those little heads they make are just awesome. And the hook gauge is so light that I can go all the way down to 6-pound fluorocarbon and still just punch them because it's like a little hypodermic needle. Yeah, that's a bait that I know it's been around a while, but there's a lot that people are just kind of starting to figure out with it. Little nuances make it even really special.
You're right. Move it. It does the work for you. You just get it out there in the right spot and let it do its thing. And sometimes let it do its thing is to do nothing.
Yeah, right.
It's enticing when they look at it. We caught a couple Friday. I was getting Friday. Drop shot. So everybody's just jigging a minnow. It's a typical fall bites going vertical, jigging a minnow, or I have some on the scope. I'm like, yep, just short little 15-footer and work it back. They're all running avids. I'm like, man, so I grabbed my 7-1 walleye turbine drop shot. First cast, bam, 18-inch walleye. And that, I'm like, man, I don't use this rod or, this enough. It's great. And then when client would hook up, I'd stick it in the rod holder and go take care of it. While I was in a rod holder, a perch or another walleye would come up right off the bottom to whack that minnow, and I got it like 10, 12 inches up, and then it made a great dead stick because it's fairly soft out there and hanging. And eventually I just sat in the back of the boat and showed this kid how to use it. And he was like, yeah, this is fun. It's a nice, good little bite. Like, people just, so many bass methods, walleye, they're all predators, they're all eating, but they just work. Tokyo rigs, I got videos out there on Tokyo rigs, especially in Chamberlain catching a ton of them. The Ned rig, drop shot, everybody thinks bass and smallmouth, but they catch a hell of a lot of walleye.
Well, the suspending jerkbait could be the best example of that. I mean, I threw those things for years and years and years. I got 2 boxes of them, specifically like Megabass 110 size, or all down to about the like pointer 78 size and those two sizes. And there were colors that I had specifically for walleye, but I'm fishing it exactly the way I would fish it for spots or smallmouth or largemouth, you know, same identical cadence, but for whatever reason, if I had any type of orange bottom or chartreuse sides, the walleyes would just absolutely choke that thing, almost to the point where it was not a good thing if you're trying to target largemouth. But I thought, you know what? If I'm walleye fishing, I'm just going to try this. I did it up on Mille Lacs. I've done it in northern Wisconsin, northern Minnesota, Missouri, Iowa, all over the place specifically for walleyes. And that bait is unreal for walleyes. And I tell you what, I don't know if a lot of people would agree with me on this, but I think a walleye hits it as harder than a bass does. I mean, you kind of know when they hit it, they get a face full of it, and in clear water, you can see them. They'll come up and just a night. Sometimes they got it like this, or they got it's gone or whatever, but you can tell it's a walleye hit. What blows my mind though, Brian, a lot of times, especially like with a Smithwick Rogue, and I fish that. Personally, that bait for walleye when the water's a little warmer and I'm fishing a really hot cadence, 1, 2, 3, stop, 1, 2, stop, 1, 2, 3, stop, just screwing with it where it almost looks like a mirror coming back at you. And I can't tell you how many times I've had them come up and mug it 20 feet out in clear water, and I can see them. I can see it all over them, and they don't get it. And I don't know why. I don't know if you have an explanation for that one, but I've seen that 100 times. I'm like, I could drop this thing on my hand and it'd be in me.
Oh, right.
And this thing's trying to attack this thing and he doesn't get it. I don't know what happens there.
The jig and wrap I get, that thing's dropping and erratic, but the jerkbait, pause, and I don't know, they just get so aggressive. I was on Green Bay, had the prototypes for the new Avids that released a few years ago. I was running the jerkbait and running a Berkeley Cutter 110. And 5-pound walleye, just crushed it. I'm like, I gotta run this. I gotta use this. And I'm like, oh yeah, this, I like this rod. And then when you get a 4-pounder, then a 5-pounder, I'm like, same thing, green and chartreuse on the sides. I'm like, oh yeah, and 8 feet of water maybe, but there was no doubt that was a walleye, and it was on, and everything's in it. I didn't have any that missed it, fortunately, but I did catch a ton of them. But yeah, that's a real fun bite when you get on it. I don't get a lot of that on the river. These fish are usually a little, deeper, but there's definitely time and place for it. You can get them, and that's an aggressive one. Jig and wraps, I get it why you miss them on those, but same deal. It's there's only one way. There's no tasting it or looking at it on the bottom. It's there it is. I got to get it now, or I don't get it at all. So, it's very aggressive. What's new at St. Croix? What do we got coming up? I know there's a bunch of contests going on right now, and I don't know how long those are lasting. Going into winter, we got any new ice rods coming out? We got the physics.
We didn't do much on ice this year. As you all know, the ice fishing the last 2 years has been bizarre, man. It's been a really crazy, especially in our big ice markets. I think a lot of companies are kind of like, whoa, let's see what's going to happen here. We still make awesome ice rods. I mean, that Legend Black Spring Bobber is still my favorite. I run that thing in conjunction with a flasher and do the lift and hold cat and mouse deal on the crappies, and just love doing that. But then we've got the CCI, the actual carbon blank high-end ice rods that are, been out for a while, but they're just awesome. But on the conventional side and on the reel side, the 7 reel brand is pretty new for St. Croix. It's been a couple of years now, and 2 reels we're launching there, the GS casting reel and the GF spinning reel. Both the GS casting reel I had in my boat for quite a while to test it, and man, it's a little bigger than its predecessor, the GF that came out a year and a half prior, but it's like a freaking sports car. It's got like multiple adjustments. It's got centrifugal and magnetic, and it's a little bigger. It's like a 250 size. So anything 15-pound line and up, I'm going to it exclusively, and I can throw it a freaking mile if I want to. I can tune it the way I want it for skipping. I can tune it the way I want it for throwing a buzzbait in the wind. Loving it. Super smooth, sexy looking, black and red, really good. And then the GF spinning reel is a price point, $110, 5-ball bearing, 750 to 3000 size, super smooth. And one thing we're noticing about 7, Brian, is one of our core values with 7 is durability. And we had thousands and thousands and thousands of these things go out. You know, whenever you launch a new brand, we had like less than 10 come back. It was like, what? And I'm looking at the metrics and, you know, talking to our largest customers about this. And I'm like, man, I go to our team. I'm like, man, we got to be sure we're right about this if I'm going to say that. You know, I mean, that's a really strong statement. I keep going back to it. And it's like, and some of the problem people have are real product manager is handling like over the phone. It's like, dude, you got to just adjust this. The guy's like, oh, okay. You know, it's not even anything wrong with it, you know? So that's really cool. Then on the rod side, the two biggest things that I'm probably most excited about in terms of volume, black bass is a rod we came out with that, SC2 has been such a stalwart material for us for forever and ever. And this has got SC3 in it, which is a step up. But there's a ton of models. It's really, really, really well balanced. The one that I tested was the 6.8 MXF casting, and we were just talking about a jerkbait. I was throwing a Mega Bass 110 with 10-pound fluorocarbon on it, and let me just say this: not all jerkbait rods are created equal. That's another thing I'll take to my grave. I mean, if you think about this. If you think about this, there's a lot of cadences with jerkbaits. You can really get on it when it's warm. I was talking about that Rogue deal. There's other times with a 110 or something with like clear sides and clear water where I'm counting to 30 before I hit that thing. And if I hit it, I don't want that thing to freak out like it's in water any warmer than that it really is, because that fish is the temperature of the water. If I'm throwing this thing in 48-degree water, and I reel down and I hit that thing and it does a freak out like the water 70, that's not good. And so I have personally messed with every tip we make for a suspended jerkbait in cold water because it matters. I mean, if they see that thing, they're like, that's not real, you know, especially cold water fish. Because generally speaking, this isn't always true, but generally speaking, when we're throwing that thing in cold water, it's clear along with it. And they're not charging it like they will when the water's 75 because they're freaking cold. They're the temperature of the water. So they come up with it like they come up on it like a blimp, you know, in the big one. They'll look at it and they're like really looking at that thing. Am I going to eat it or not? And if they do eat it, part of it could be, you know, the best analogy I could give you is if you go down to any reservoir that has shad in it that freezes and go down there in the spring when all the catfish guys are down there just whacking on them because those shad are all dead in the ice, right? Yeah. But the ones that aren't dead, watch how they're moving around. And it's the best way I could explain it. They're just kind of going one tail kick slide, and that's it. They're not going at all. And that's when I'm like, okay, that, you know, there's something more to this when we're fishing these things in cold water. And so that was the bait I tested with black bass, and there's a ton of models. It's got a EVA handle, super cool looking. Go on our website and check it out. It's really cool. And then we got also GXR is what we call a system. It's a rod and reel, both spinning and castings, like 8 models, 4 in spinning, 4 in casting. SC2 blank. And SC2 is responsible for the number 1 selling rod in the history of North America in Triumph, and the number 1 selling rod in the history of U.S. produced for St. Croix, which is Premier. And that's what this blank is. It is bad to the bone, okay? And we picked the right links, powers, actions, and the reel is really, really smooth. On the casting side, 5-ball bearings, but they're Japanese bearings. And, you know, we've had these things before where I'm comping other bearings with other reels, and, you know, one reel might say, well, man, mine's got 9-ball bearings in it. Well, guess what? I'll take 3 really, really, really good ones, especially around the spool. A couple around the spool that are good ones makes all the difference in the world. And that's what we did with it. So super excited about that. At ICAST, it was really, really well received, both Black Bass and GXR, and on the 7 side too. So we're all about new product and bringing things to market, and we've got some rock stars right now for sure.
The launch at the Classic with the physics rod, I mean, the forward-facing sonar movement, it's hit hard. It's been all the buzz this year. You've heard about it. Tired of talking about it, but got a rod set up for it, which just makes perfect sense. And
yeah,
McKinney's had a pretty good run with it.
Specifically, you're talking about some what we're calling minnow shakers, right?
Yep.
All these young guns out there that are just handing it to people and fishing that minnow shaker. And there's a bunch of different ways to do that. There's a bunch of different tails, and that's really a personal preference deal. But it's really like a underwater slow cadence jerkbait, and they're super lethal with it. Obviously, they're watching on forward facing and watching the attitude of the fish determining how they use it. But what we found is the rods for that aren't super long, 6'6", 6'8". We had those blanks forever in walleye, forever. And we thought, you know what? We're going to put that molded carbon fiber physics handle on it, really turn it into a badass forward-facing minnow-shaking scoping rod, and that's what we did in physics. And physics is another really cool project. It's outside the box. You look at it, and it's like, man, that's St. Croix really getting outside the box, But there, you look at the old guys like you and I, and then you look at this whole demographic of these young anglers are just hammers, man. I mean, they're so good. And to see how advanced they are, you got to take all age dem. And how about the women out there? These ladies can flat out catch them, And so I think all the companies need to pay high respect for all these different demographics, and really listen to them and, listen to what they want. And it definitely pays off, but it's different. I'm still pretty traditional, Legend Tournament, Victory a little bit, Avid. I love Avid. But
those Avids are a guide's dream with stainless steel guides. They can no longer break the inserts or the rod tips by reeling the jigs and the bottom bouncers all the way into the rod tips, which I get excited or looking at the fish, but they just keep cranking it, and I'm like, stop, but yeah, we're going all Avid for the guide clients, and it's slowly getting them over there and starting to get them into some of the sevens. I had a guy the other day message about Seaguar's PEX8 micro braid line. So you're talking super, super, super thin diameter, which I use, on finesse. I have it on a Legend Elite rod, and I'll use that for minnow shake it or just finesse stuff. It's like 18-pound test, but the diameter is like 2 pound. It's just, but the super thin diameter lines get super slick. So sometimes your knots or whatever overkill it. But he's like, well, how much backing do you put on them? I'm like, I don't put any on. I'm like, I don't know what reels you're using, but I don't need any because I got a 7. And so that, attribute about it's super cool. If that, I don't know, what do you call it, a rubber sleeve or a gasket basically around the spool that prevents the slippage. So I don't have to carry the generic spool of whatever kind of mono, to fill. And if you got it while you're on the water or something, or a night for a tournament, it's just quick, it's simple, it's easy, and it works. And I've yet to ever had any issues with it. And on the 7 reels, the drag is probably my favorite part of them on the GS NX. It's just easy to adjust. It sticks out a little bit, it's kind of the logo V there. And even while you're fighting fish, nobody wants to mess with the drag, but we have to mess with the drag sometimes because you're like, oh, it's a lot bigger than I thought, or whatever cases. And it's just easy to find and easy to adjust. So I dig that a lot. I'm sure that's probably a lot of the feedback you got on them with those things being out there now.
Yeah, right behind durability with the spinning reel is the drag, beyond the shadow of a doubt. What it is, it's a carbon fiber stainless steel. We call it a multi-stack. And the biggest pain in the butt in drags, especially now with high pressured fish, forward facing sonar, that I'm convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt they're starting to ping to a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I've literally seen, I'll light up a brush pile, especially on a really heavily pressured lake. I'll light that thing up from 30 feet away and I'll watch a fish swim out of the brush pile and leave it when I'm sitting there pinging it. So now I'm to the point where I'll find that brush and I'll turn away from it and not light him up, but the point is with that drag is it's forced us to use light line and downsize and finesse if you're behind a bunch of boats or it's a real pressured situation. And if you notice, with really regardless of the size of the reel, one thing I've been really happy with is I call it startup. You don't have to kind of get it going and then it's smooth. It starts up really good. And if you've got a big smallmouth on a drop shot right at the boat and he decides to say, guess what? That's a big shiny boat. I'm getting out of here. And I got 2 foot of line off my tip. That matters. And not breaking fish off with it. It's just super smooth. And some of these drop shot hooks, whether it's a nose hook or the owner cover shot, which I use a lot, if you look at the gauge of that hook, it's not a real heavy hook. So you want things to really kind of give and go away, and not lock down like a flipping or punching scenario, which would be opposite of that, right? And if you don't have a good drag on a spinning reel with as light of lines as we're using right now, it can be problematic. So we're getting really good feedback on that.
Yeah, for sure. Mine were screaming the other day. I keep them a little loose for clients, just lack of experience. And I just say, and I'm just like, just keep reeling. Well, it's not coming. I'm like, it's just keep reeling. Eventually you're going to start to gain a little bit. And if they're more experienced, I usually give them a little step up and a rod, a real combo to use. But a lot of them aren't, and they're guide trips. They're just out there to have fun and learn some stuff. But it's keep them a little loose. And if it's a 20-pound flathead, I might crank it down a little bit so we're not there for 30 minutes. But we'll get it to the boat. There's been plenty of that happening lately too. I'm loving them. I got my 7s. I got that a couple of the bait casters. Didn't really get to do near the bass fishing as I anticipated to upriver this year. It was kind of dirty up there, and now it's really clean. But even all the bass guys that fish out on the Lewis and Clark mainly have been on the lake. And so early in the year, I got on a lot of smallmouth. We were getting walleye limits pretty fast. So it's like, all right, it's like 11 o'clock. We got all day. Let's go chase some of these bass up by the dam. And it was plastics and cranks, and and the smallies were getting much bigger. Not a lot of largemouth, but we get a lot of largemouth further up in the river. But for whatever reason, the Bass Club even had I've seen more bass boats on the lake ever, like 500% this year than I ever have, fishing the reservoir part versus the river part. And I don't know if it's just that much better or upriver just kind of, we had floods, which you guys got to experience as well a little bit over in Iowa. It was during the customer appreciation day when I was there for about an hour, and I had to hurry up and get home because my basement was full of water.
Right. I remember that.
They stopped all the flows. So that brought, way upriver, way down. And I don't know if that pushed, obviously those fish had to get out of there and maybe they moved out to the lake, but a lot of bass fishing. But I think as a sport in general, it's growing. I believe numbers are up, and Jesse would know this with being on the ASA, but I don't even know, 55 million anglers or something like that. I mean, we're going up, hunting's going down, but anglers are going up slowly but surely, but more the better.
Yeah, we had a huge spike during COVID, with angler participation, and that has subsided for sure. But the big challenge now is keeping them, because angler participation is so important for the health of our fisheries. And most people would say that guy's smoking something, because how would a fishery possibly be better if you got a ton more people doing it? Well, everything people buy, there's an excise tax on what you buy that goes back to fisheries, and it helps fund legislation. And, there's not some one person that will listen to this that doesn't understand there's forces out there that want us not to fish certain areas, and try to move away from the things that we all love to do, whether you're a hunter or a fisherman, and I don't want to get political here, but it matters. I mean, numbers are power, they speak volume, and the more fishing participation we can get, the better. I've always seen that. Now, that said, I think we need to practice responsible harvest. Obviously on the bass side, I'm huge on catch and release. I'll keep my crappies enough to eat them and let the rest of them go. And I let a lot of walleyes go, Brad. I know you'd probably cringe to hear that, but I'll keep a couple, eat them, and let them swim off. I mean, it's nothing. I don't know. It's just 95%. I think it's a good thing.
If not 99% of the ones I catch, I let go. So clients, not so much. Me, I don't keep them. No, I'll keep a few out of Chamberlain early in the spring, that a couple of days of limits. I'm like, all right, that's plenty for a while. And right near in the fall, last few trips a year, all right, I'll go out and get a limit or two to get through the winter. And that's it. I did keep some perch and ate some perch the other day because I had a big perch, like it was 1.6 pounds. But it wouldn't go back. It wasn't even deep water, but it threw it back and it bellied up and netted it through the live well. And I'm like, he ain't going to make it. So we caught a couple more. I went, all right. So I cooked them up the next night. It was good. It's good perch.
I love eating panfish, crappie, walleye, bluegill, and perch are my 4 favorite. Ice fishing is my favorite time to eat them. For whatever reason, they just, golly, they come out. They're so good. It's almost like when you clean them, you get home, the meat's kind of white. You don't have a lot of blood in them, and I love it. But angler participation's huge. Yeah, what's that?
Ice fishing. The best couple of walleye I've ever had were ice fishing straight out of the ice, and I came home and I drove 2 hours and they were still alive in the bucket with no watter.
Yeah,
I was like, you got to be kidding me! I cleaned them and then I saltwatered them and brined them that night, cooked them the next day. I was like, wow, those were. I mean, it's just cold. Water's clean. It's cold. But yeah, you're right. Angler participation is huge, and in early November, I got Chris Horton coming on with the Congressional Sportsman's Foundation on the sport fishing side, as well as I believe Blue Carpenter is going to join us, National Wildlife, and we're going to talk about all of those aspects of it. So those out there watching and listening, you're going to want to tune into that. We're going to get deep. It's not the sexiest stuff when you talk about politics and the history of conservation and how all this stuff works, but I think a lot of people don't understand it or know it, or how the funds are used and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to break that down, and hopefully everybody tunes in, because if you don't know, you're going to get a lesson from Chris. So nobody knows it better. I mean, it's the guy's, that's what he does, lives it day in and day out. And whether it's in DC or North Carolina or wherever he's at, and it makes a big deal, but it all starts with angler participation, period. Whether it's kids fishing, keeping them fishing, re-engaging anglers that came in during COVID, that's important. So, but you guys are putting the products out there. You got St. Croix, got the Customer Appreciation Day, and usually it was like third weekend in June, typically.
Yeah. It usually hovers sometime around Father's Day weekend. It doesn't necessarily land right on it, but it's around that time, year in and year out.
So that's a great time. People get out there. They got seminars. Dan's there. They got Tony Roach. You got all these guys giving seminars, lessons. You get a touch, feel, play with the products. Just phenomenal. It doesn't and sales, huge sales going on, huge sales. So if you're looking to save a couple bucks, get out there for that. That was my first time there. Unfortunately, I didn't get to hang out and experience it for the whole day or two like I planned on it, but I am fortunate enough to get to spend a little time in the boat with Dan every last few Aprils. Not this year as in Erie, but hopefully this year. I don't know when Shields Fishing University is, but St. Croix does a lot of the manufacturers bring out a lot of the experts like Dan, and the Shields staff basically gets some hands-on learning. And that's just, I don't know if there's any other companies out there doing it, but that is just a phenomenal event. And these guys walk away with just a wealth of knowledge. I mean, you've been doing that for years.
Forever. It's an amazing event. It's one thing to, you and I talked about a little bit about Ned rigging today. But there's nothing that replaces going and doing it yourself and getting your hands on it and feeling what somebody's talking about. And that's what this event does. We'll have classroom sessions, but then we take them out in the river and put them in Brian's boat, and we've got amazing walleye fishermen out there, which is really out of my wheelhouse, out that Chamberlain walleye deal out there. I mean, I catch them, but because Brian puts me on.
Yeah, you can catch them. You can catch them.
But it's really, what a blessing for those young men and women to be able to go do that. And they can bring it back and talk the talk to the people on the sales floor. And, back to the point about angler participation, I did a podcast on this a while back too. I mean, I was asked, what's the biggest thing to try to do to keep people in the sport of fishing? And it's very, very simple answer to me. I mean, there's not one answer. Obviously, you talk about being good stewards of the environment and the advantages of, picking up trash out of the water and just doing the right thing is a life lesson in anything you do. And I get that. But specific to the question about how to keep them in the sport is
take them,
catch them. In other words, if you got, seriously, don't go grind something out for 8 hours like we do in practice for bass and get 2 bites. Like if you see seagulls diving on white bass and they're blowing up, man, time that thing, get that window, take the guy or gal out and get some binoculars and find them and say, man, there they are, and fire a 250 up and run to them and throw a pop-R out there and it goes, whoosh. They're going to come home and go, this is something I want to do again. But it can be bluegills off the bank. It can be anything. But I think just getting people success in catching fish is I think our responsibility for those of us that have done this quite a bit to pay that forward. Because if you go out for hours and hours and not catch them, is it cool? Is it better than sitting at home watching a soap opera? Probably. but it's not as fun as catching them. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Moderation, short spurts, get them on the fish. And I keep a couple ripple shads or plastics just sitting in the compartment on top of the boat. So when I see that white bass blow up, I can just say, reel them in. And I slam the trolling motor and fly over and I grab their jig and I slip the plastic on them, like, just start throw. And it's just, every cast. And I'm like, it may only last 5, 10, 15 minutes, They're like, wow, that was fun. I had a young kid there today, caught a Saturday, probably a 36-inch northern on a Lindy rig. So fortunately, it was very, very tip of its lip, so it didn't break. I'm like, wow, you got it. Be a big walleye. And then it came up a little bit. I'm like, way too big for a walleye. I'm like, oh, it's a northern, but he wanted a big northern, and and there was a little local tournament going on and he was hooting and hollering. I'm like, they all, first boat that came in, we were netting about a 4-pound walleye. So they saw that. And then he was hooting and hollering an hour later. I'm like, they think you got like a 10-pounder. You got all these guys around here getting all pissed off. It was funny, but he was stoked. His dad was like, that made it. That was it. That's all we needed. I don't care if we caught another fish all day. Now I don't have to take him to Canada. So I saved a bunch of money because he got his dream fish. But I'm like, yeah, he's hooked. So catch them, they're hooked. It's simple. Take them.
Well, think of how many people. It's a huge compliment I'll give to you, and I know guiding is obviously a big part of that is making a living. I get that, but aside from that, as good as you are, and another thing, Brian, you do a really, really good job of, and I've spent quite a few hours with you in the boat now out there at these South Dakota events, is I think talking to people about the why is really important. I mean, it's one thing to get a bite and, swing on one and reel it in, net it, oh, that was cool. But why did that happen? Was it something you did to impart action on that bait at that time? What did that bite feel like? And they'd say, well, man, I felt this thump. Well, what was that? That's not like a dog biting something. That's actually something sucking it in. What you're feeling is this lure speeding up really fast. They're like, really? And get them part of the process and understanding why things are going on is critical. You've always done a really good job of that, being in the boat with you, listening to you.
Those fun things are for so many of those, those new employees, and we take it for granted sometimes catching 18, 19, 20-inch walleyes some days over there on every cast. I don't know how many times, personal best. We're like, it's a good one. It's another 8-19 or a 20-incher. And as you know, the evening bite gets better as the sun sets. That last group that goes out always whacks that 20-plus incher. So it's take photos. But yeah, they're lit up and they're just stoked. And that's my personal best. I'm like, well, they're from Idaho, right, where it's an invasive species and they don't get to catch them. But yeah, I just seen that excitement on him. Like, that guy's hooked. He's leaving here with a positive experience, and no matter what products they're selling or talking to the customers over there, they at least had it in their hand. They got to use it. They got experience with it. It's like from electronics to line to reels to rods. I mean, hell, they're even getting to experience different rides and a bunch of different boat brands. So that is quite the thing they put on. And you've been the keynote speaker there for years, and if you ever get the chance to catch Dan at a seminar, or if you're a Shields employee and you get to go to the fishing university, you're in for a treat. I call him the professor for a reason. The guy knows their product inside and out. So we'll wrap this up, Dan. What we talked about new stuff. We talked 7. We talked fishing. If you could leave these new and veteran anglers maybe with a little nugget, a little tip to help them on their angling journey moving forward, what do you got for
them? Keep it real. I mean, just think outside the box. Life's so short, man. I mean, fish hard, do it the right way, and probably more important than anything else is pay it forward. I mean, like I told you earlier, that dock shooting thing, I'm not going to say I never would have done it, because sooner or later I'd have come up on somebody down there and saw them and like, oh my God, when I've probably figured it out. But the fact that it was introduced to me, and God rest his soul, he's the guy I shot that video with that you'll watch if you YouTube St. Croix Lake Ozarks dock shooting. He's no longer with us. But the fact that he showed me how to do that leads me want to show people how to do the little small percentage of things that I know. So that's what I would leave people with, and just live it and love it, man. I mean, get out and do it. It's we're very, very blessed to have a chance to fish the way we do, for sure.
We are. We have a lot of great fisheries out there. I was talking to Ryan Buddy on one of these who's been fishing overseas for the world predator stuff. And I don't think people realize how good we have it here in the U.S. with the amount of fisheries, the size, the quality. And you think some of our places are high pressure. Go over to Japan and go fishing. You want to talk about some high pressure fisheries where you have 10 times as many people and the fisheries are this much, we're this big and their fisheries are that big. So, take care of the resources. It'll take care of you, and get out and do it and go enjoy some quality time outside, whether you're in a tree or you're on the water. No better place to be.
Amen, man.
All right. Well, Dan, appreciate your time. I know you are a busy guy over there, and you probably got to jump on another podcast today or 10, or I certainly got plenty of phone calls, but it is like 70, 80 degrees out. So you might need to go get some fishing in too. So the boat cleaning is gonna happen for this guy while it's hot out as we wrap up the season. But once again, thanks for your time, Dan. Appreciate it. All the words of wisdom and the insight. Always good to catch up with you. And all of those that are listening, you can catch this podcast over at Apple, Spotify, all those podcast places, the Walleye Guys page, and the Walleye Guys on YouTube. Thanks for listening and tuning in, and stay safe, and we'll see you on the water.